Jinwoo arrived promptly for the A-rank raid undertaken by Strike Squad B. The miners welcomed him warmly, a stark contrast to the previous day's apprehension. The camaraderie and sense of normalcy momentarily brought back forgotten memories for Jinwoo, a feeling he wouldn't mind getting used to. After a productive morning, the mining team received a request from Strike Squad B for a porter. As their designated one hadn't shown up, the miners, however, were hesitant. The risk of entering an A-ranked dungeon, especially for low-ranked hunters like themselves, was far too high. Jinwoo, however, surprised everyone by volunteering. The miners were shocked. They tried to dissuade him, highlighting the dangers and the fact that Jinwoo, being an E-rank, was woefully underprepared for such a task. Jinwoo, however, remained resolute. He saw this as an opportunity to learn from another Strike Squad's raid strategy, especially considering it was an A-ranked dungeon. Sun Ki-hoon, the leader of Strike Squad B, readily accepted Jinwoo's offer despite the initial disapproval from the miners. As they entered the vast A-rank gate, Jinwoo couldn't help but marvel at its sheer size, even larger than the previous one. Sun Ki-hoon noticed Jinwoo wasn't struggling with the bags and initiated a conversation. He learned that it was Jinwoo's second time witnessing an A-rank gate, albeit his first time with Strike Squad B. Sun Ki-hoon explained that while the gate's size was impressive, the mana levels were lower than the one Jinwoo encountered the day before. He assured Jinwoo that the second-tier squad was more than capable of handling the raid's challenges. Jinwoo observed the Strike Squad members, a team of 11 A ranks and 6 B ranks, all formidable hunters in their own right. He couldn't help but think about how Juhee, had she overcome her trauma, could have easily joined such a prestigious squad. Sun Ki-hoon, determined to prove himself as the official leader of Strike Squad B, rallied his team. An A-rank healer eased Jinwoo's anxieties by assuring him that porters rarely became targets as long as the Strike Squad performed well. She explained the hierarchy of blame within a raid, placing the brunt of responsibility on the Strike Squad for the healer's safety. Jinwoo, however, couldn't shake off a strange sense of foreboding, similar to what he felt near the Red Gate. He tried to rationalize it away, reminding himself he wasn't even a member of the Strike Squad. As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, Sun Ki-hoon, brimming with confidence in his abilities and those of his team, prepared to lead his first official raid for the Hunters Guild. The battle ensues, with the strike team launching a devastating attack on the first wave of enemies, the Dungeon Jackals. Their glowing red eyes and sharp teeth were no match for the coordinated assault from the experienced hunters. The scenes are gruesome as the mages unleash fiery spells, annihilating the jackals with ease. However, confusion arose amongst the strike team. Jinwoo, surprised by the presence of jackals in an A-rank dungeon, questioned their normalcy. The A-rank healer clarified that jackals, being C-rank beasts, were too weak to survive in such an environment. They usually fell prey to stronger monsters, making their population unsustainable within an A-ranked dungeon. These low-ranked beasts were out of place in an A-ranked dungeon, and the leash marks on their bodies revealed a disturbing truth. They weren't wild animals, but domesticated hunting dogs. Jinwoo recognized the intelligence behind this strategy, a cunning opponent that utilized beasts to weaken their defenses. As Jinwoo's sneaking suspicion unfolded, giant footsteps emerged from the shadows. The towering high orcs, each a colossal nightmare, wielding weapons that could cleave a man in two, instilling fear in the strike team. Panic swept through the strike squad. Ki-hoon, their leader, barely managed to deflect a hurled spear with his shield, the impact sending tremors through his arm. The sheer strength of the orcs was unlike anything they'd encountered before. Ki-hoon's enchanted shield, a symbol of his rank and a source of pride, cracked under the impact, a testament to the raw, barbaric power of the high orcs. The hunter's skills, honed against lesser foes, proved useless against these monstrous warriors. Orcish axes cleaved through the squad's defenses, leaving a trail of carnage in their wake. Ki-hoon, his face etched with desperation, screamed at the mages to prioritize on protecting them. The mages, grim-faced, acknowledged the order but warned of their limited options. Unleashing their most potent spells, they rained fiery destruction upon the orcs. The dungeon momentarily illuminated with the brilliance of their attacks, but the victory cry died in their throats as the orcs emerged unscathed. They were immune to magic. One of the mages, realizing the dire situation, contemplated a desperate gamble. She could summon a powerful beast, a last resort that would leave her drained of mana and vulnerable, but the thought of letting her comrades fall without a fight spurred her on. The battle descended into a desperate struggle for survival. Hunters fell one by one, their armor offering little protection against the orcish onslaught. Tanks, tasked with holding the defensive line, found their provocation skills useless as the orcs ignored their taunts. Cahoon, forced to make a heart-wrenching decision, ordered the squad to split into smaller clusters to avoid being surrounded. Disbelief washed over Cahoon as he grasped the evilness of their difficult situation. The association's assessment had been a colossal blunder. This wasn't just an A-rank dungeon, it was a death trap teeming with over 20 high orcs, each a match for an A-rank hunter. The B-rank hunters were hopelessly outmatched, and even the A-rank hunters, though stronger, would be overwhelmed if their weaker comrades fell. Cahoon braced himself for casualties, a grim reality of the desperate fight they were involved in. One of the mages, her eyes alight with determination, unleashed a spell so powerful that it bathed the orc in a blinding glow. The magic gripped him tightly, a radiant force meant to subdue, but the orc shook off the enchantment with unsettling ease. His gaze swept the battlefield, settling on the healer, who was desperately tending to the wounded. In an instant, he surged forward, his pace swift and relentless. The mage's voice cut through the chaos, a scream of warning that was almost drowned by the clamor of the fight. "Watch out," she cried. But the healer, her eyes wide with terror, only managed a trembling nod before closing them, bracing herself for the inevitable. The fear in her eyes was palpable, a silent plea that went unanswered as the orc closed the distance, his shadow looming larger with every heartbeat. Just as despair threatened to consume them, a miracle unfolded. As an orc charged towards a terrified healer, a blur of movement intervened. Genu, the unassuming porter, emerged from the shadows with inhuman speed. In a single fluid motion, he sliced through the orc's throat, his blade a whisper of death. The colossal beast collapsed with a deafening thud, its blood splattering on the stunned healer. The strike squad, momentarily speechless, could only stare in disbelief at what just happened. The tide of the battle turned abruptly. Cahoon, bewildered by the sudden shift in momentum, watched as Genu, a blur of inhuman speed, danced among the orcs. His movements were a lethal symphony, each strike a calculated blow that sent orcs crumpling to the ground. The remaining orcs, weakened and disoriented by this unseen assailant, fell prey to the renewed offensive of the hunters. Mages unleashed a torrent of spells that finally pierced the orcs' defenses. Relief washed over the squad as they brought down the remaining beasts one by one. A wave of guilt washed over Genu as a splatter of orc blood landed on him. These were elite hunters, the best the guild had to offer, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were woefully unprepared for this encounter. He trusted their skills, yet the memory of the healer's near-death experience gnawed at him. He couldn't stand by and let these monstrous creatures potentially inflict further harm. A notification flashed across Genu's vision. He had leveled up by assisting the squad. This was a revelation. He could grow stronger by fighting alongside others. But the knowledge that he could have defeated all the orcs himself was a tempting proposition. However, the guild had paid a hefty sum for the dungeon permit, and interfering directly wouldn't be right. He decided to settle for subtly weakening the orcs, leaving the final blows to the hunters. The battle ended with a collective sigh of relief. Strike Squad B had emerged victorious. Though pretty beaten up, no one was seriously injured, a near miracle considering the initial onslaught. However, suspicion flickered in the eyes of one of the mages. Being a magic caster herself, she couldn't help but notice the subtle distortions in the air, the signs of a camouflage skill being used. The healer, recounting her experience, mentioned witnessing an orc being ripped apart mid-air. The possibility of an unseen spellcaster arose. Gina, the squad's sole telekinetic user, furiously denied any involvement. Their team lacked the magic necessary for such feats. The suspicion then shifted towards Genu, the unassuming porter. Sweat beaded on his brow as he realized he might be exposed. Realizing the potential consequences of revealing Genu's secret, the mage decided to stay silent for now. The most important thing she thought was that there was someone inside this dungeon that's powerful enough to cast such an advanced spell. They needed to get out of there and report their findings to the guild. Cahoon, the leader, acknowledged the lingering mystery. The orcs' behavior had undeniably shifted during the second half of the battle, allowing for an easier victory. The question of who or what intervened remained unanswered. Despite the victory, the squad was was wary. They had encountered high orcs at the very entrance, a terrifying prospect considering the unknown dangers that might lurk deeper within. A heated debate arose. Some argued for continuing the raid, fueled by the adrenaline of their recent victory. Others, shaken by the ordeal, advocated for a strategic retreat. Cahoon, torn between his ambition and responsibility for his team's safety, wrestled with the decision. Genu silently observed, understanding the weight of Cahoon's choice. Every hunter craved the glory of conquering a dungeon, but a wise leader knew when to cut their losses. Finally, Cahoon made the call that they would retreat, recognizing the need for safety over ambition. As the squad prepared to leave, some of them expressed relief, fearing they would be forced to continue. Cahoon, attempting to reassure his team, instructed them to head out, but their departure was abruptly halted. As they prepared to leave, Cahoon's voice boomed. A magical barrier blocked their exit. Panic surged through the group. This wasn't there before. The mages confirmed it could be dispelled, but it would take time. The gravity of the situation sunk in. This was far beyond their capabilities. The initial relief of victory evaporated, replaced by a chilling realization they had stumbled upon a foe far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Gina, realizing the urgency, attempted to lift the barrier with her spells, but her efforts were in vain. The mana waves produced by this barrier were so intense that even hunters who couldn't usually perceive mana waves could feel them. This was on an entirely different level. The question lingered. Why hadn't anyone detected these powerful mana waves from outside the dungeon? It suggested that the boss had the ability to conceal its presence. The situation worsened. A sudden curse swept through the dungeon, targeting only the mages. They convulsed, coughing up blood, their eyes glazing over. Cahoon shouted in alarm for a divine spell to counter the curse, but fear hung heavy in the air. The strike squad, triumphant moments ago, now faced a terrifying new threat, their future hanging in the balance. Hope flickered briefly before being extinguished by a wave of terror. Emerging from the magical barrier, a legion of orcs, even more formidable than the first, surged forth. Their imposing forms and the raw power radiating from them sent a shiver down the spines of the squad. Fear, raw and unconcealed, flickered in their eyes. Cahoon, his voice tight with despair, acknowledged their awful situation. Fighting was a guaranteed death sentence. He yearned for the presence of the guild's most powerful hunters, Mr. Choi and Miss Cha, who might have turned the tide. The orcs, with a discord of growls and roars, displayed their menacing weapons, their sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. One of the orcs, seemingly larger and more imposing than the others, addressed them in a surprisingly clear human tongue. He introduced himself as Kargalgan, the mighty shaman of the orcs. The revelation of a talking orc sparked confusion and suspicion amongst the squad. Was this sorcery? A puppet controlled by some unseen entity? The thought of negotiating with a monstrous beast was absurd. Some members of the squad advocated for a desperate fight, a last stand against the inevitable. Cahoon, however, saw a glimmer of hope. He directed a question at Kargalgan. Was he the one who erected the barrier? The shaman confirmed his role, hinting at a far more powerful entity residing within the cave. The battered mages, their faces etched with pain, corroborated his claim. The magic barrier was beyond their capabilities to dispel. Cahoon pressed on, inquiring about the existence of a creature mightier than Kargalgan. The shaman's response was a challenge: either face his soldiers or follow them. With a heavy heart, Cahoon made the impossible decision that they would comply. A chorus of panicked protests erupted from the squad, but Cahoon remained resolute. This was their only chance. Genu, observing the turn of events, understood the gravity of the situation. They were headed straight into the heart of the enemy's lair, where even more high orcs awaited. Cahoon's plan, as desperate as it was to launch a surprise attack on the boss. If successful, it might disrupt the magic barrier, allowing Genu to escape and seek reinforcements. Cahoon approached Genu, his voice laden with determination. He explained the plan, a surprise attack on the boss. While the squad created a diversion, Genu had to escape and alert the main strike squad. Genu, however, expressed doubt. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. Cahoon countered. Their primary objective was to seal the dungeon, not guarantee their survival. The fate of many hinged on their success. The A-rank healer entrusted Jinu with her will, a final message for her family in case of her demise. They were trained for such situations, but Jinu, an outsider, deserved a chance to live. Jinu accepted the will, vowing to find another way to deliver it. He may not have known the full extent of the boss's power, but the intensity of the mana waves emanating from within left no room for doubt. This was a formidable foe, yet Jinu refused to surrender. The battle was far from over. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, Cha-Hai-In, completely unaware of the dire situation unfolding within, visited the mining facility in search of Jinu. Learning of his absence and his role as a porter for Strike Squad B, a wave of shock washed over her. An E-rank hunter, a porter in a high-risk A-rank dungeon. This made no sense. Her suspicions grew. The image of Jinu wielding a weapon near the boss's lair from the previous day resurfaced in her mind. Something wasn't right. Fueled by a surge of determination, Cha-Hai-In decided to enter the dungeon herself. The miners, confused by her sudden change of plans, offered her a pickaxe, the only weapon at their disposal. Cha-Hai-In, though clearly frustrated by the lack of a proper weapon, steeled her resolve and charged into the dungeon, ready to face whatever awaited her. The scene shifts to a colossal cavern, resembling a grand arena. The dim light barely illuminated the vastness of the hall, its walls adorned with red banners and flickering torches that cast a warm yet intense glow. Stone statues and intricate carvings adorned the walls, lending an air of ancient grandeur. Multi-tiered balconies lined the cavern, connected by heavy chains that added a medieval touch. The only source of illumination seemed to come from the glowing red eyes of hundreds of hulking orcs that surrounded the Strike Squad. These were no ordinary orcs. Their muscles bulged like iron beneath thick hides, and their eyes burned with an unnatural crimson light that spoke of dark magic and immense power, a sight that both awed and terrified the Strike Squad. A wave of chills ran down the spines of the squad as they found themselves vastly outnumbered. Ki-hoon, the leader, understood the gravity of the situation. If such an army escaped the dungeon, they could easily decimate a small city before the arrival of high-ranking hunters. Their only hope was to vanquish the boss. The boss was in the center of the cavern, seated on a large throne that accentuated his power and command. Was the orc leader. He wore a red cape, a horned helmet, and formidable armor decorated with glowing blue symbols. A massive weapon rested in his hand, a testament to his readiness for battle. 4 imposing beasts guarded him, adding to the daunting aura. Defeating the shaman and his elite guard seemed like an insurmountable challenge. When Ki-hoon gives the signal, we attack all at once. The squad members rallied each other, their target clear, the shaman. "Do you fear me, humans?" The shaman boomed, his voice echoing in the cavern. A collective gasp escaped the squad. The raw power emanating from him was overwhelming. "How are we supposed to fight this guy?" A mage whimpered, feeling utterly insignificant compared to this monstrous entity. "He's in a league of his own." The sheer disparity between their powers was demoralizing. Ki-hoon, trying to grasp the situation, questioned why the shaman had brought them all the way into the dungeon instead of simply killing them on the spot. The shaman's response was chilling in its simplicity. It was for fun. Ki-hoon struggled to comprehend this, but the shaman elaborated, explaining that it intended to entertain its soldiers by killing the humans one by one for the remaining time inside the dungeon. The shaman then noted something unusual about one of the squad members, indicating Jinu. Ki-hoon, processing the shaman's words, realized with horror that they were being used as mere entertainment. To their enemies, their lives were nothing more than toys to be played with and discarded at whim. This revelation deepened their despair, as they understood their worthlessness in the eyes of the shaman and its soldiers. Fueled by a surge of defiance, Ki-hoon roared, "Everyone charge!" The squad launched a desperate assault on the boss, but their attacks were met with a shimmering barrier, the hymn of protection. Ki-hoon, the first to reach the shaman, recoiled as he slammed into the invisible shield. In a swift and decisive move, the shaman activated his spell of gravity acceleration. The spell's immense power caused Ki-hoon to be hurled high into the air, leaving him momentarily weightless and helpless. Then, with a brutal, unrelenting force, he was slammed back onto the ground. The impact was severe, and the blow blow was devastating. Blood gushed from Cahoon's eyes and mouth, painting a gruesome picture of the damage inflicted upon him. The squad members stood in utter disbelief, their minds struggling to process the horrifying scene before them. Their initial resolve and bravery seemed to waver as they watched their comrades suffer such a grievous blow. All they could do, paralyzed by shock and fear, was scream his name, Cahoon, their voices echoing the desperation and helplessness they felt in that harrowing moment. Just as despair threatened to consume them, Jinoo stepped forward, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly blue light emanated an aura that demanded attention. He knelt beside the fallen Cahoon. "This dungeon belongs to the Hunters Guild," Jinoo addressed Cahoon, his voice firm. "I know I'm not supposed to interfere, but these high orcs will slaughter your entire squad. Do you give me permission to kill all the beasts in this dungeon?" Before Cahoon could respond, an elite orc lunged at Jinoo. With lightning reflexes honed by his heightened senses, Jinoo summoned his shadow soldier Iron. Iron intercepted the orc with a deadly blow, eliminating the threat before it could land. "Do I have your permission to take care of all the beasts in this dungeon?" Jinoo repeated, his gaze unwavering. Battered and bruised, Cahoon rasped, "Please, I beg you." The shaman, intrigued by Jinoo's display of power, cackled, "Interesting abilities for a mere human, but how long do you think your little trick will work on us?" Jinoo, unfazed by the shaman's mockery, acknowledged the formidable energy he sensed. "This is the strongest opponent I've ever faced," he admitted. A steely glint entered his eyes. "However, I feel sorry to say this, but this is a terrible matchup. For you, I mean, not me." With a decisive gesture, Jinoo summoned his entire arsenal, Igris, Iron, Ice Bear, and the others. The cavern trembled with anticipation as Jinoo and his shadow soldiers faced off against the shaman and his elite orc army. An epic clash, a battle between gods, was about to unfold.